Thank you very much, and thank you to the Minister for such an engaging and thoughtful presentation, really linking the whole energy transition to a broader societal agenda, including even geopolitical aspects, and emphasizing the critical importance of a just transition to a low-carbon economy. So I think there's a lot of interesting things there to expand on. I wanted to say a few words before I call on our two panelists, just to say a couple of words on this roadmap that we're presenting today. So this roadmap is it's a result of a collaborative effort, as was mentioned, and it really springs out of a project that we've had going at the PRI for some time called the Project of Fiduciary Duty in the 21st Century. This was a project where we tried to look at the concept of fiduciary duty, how it's applied across jurisdictions, civil law countries, common law countries, and trying to give a good agenda for implementing responsible investing across different jurisdictions, recognizing that there are different contexts. So we've provided now 11 so-called country roadmaps, and the roadmap that we're releasing today for France is number 12. So you may ask why wasn't France the first one? Obviously France is such a great country, an important country. But of course, the reality is that you have come so much further in France, so it was more urgent in other countries. And that's why we have done other countries first. But this concept of fiduciary duty is critical, and these are, of course, duties that investors have to their clients and savers. They include typically concepts like loyalty and prudence. And although the legal language may vary from jurisdiction to jurisdictions, these are features that typically would exist. So these duties exist to ensure that those who manage other people's money act in the interest of beneficiaries, rather than serving their own interests. And these decisions made by fiduciaries, of course, have enormous consequences down through the investment chain, from asset owners to investment managers to the companies that they invest in, and ultimately to management in companies themselves. So a modern interpretation of these duties is that investors should integrate financially material sustainability issues. This should be consistent with the time frame of the obligation, and we can just note that a typical pension fund will have an investment horizon in many cases of many decades. Secondly, investors should understand and integrate sustainability preferences of their clients and savers. And thirdly, investors should disclose their approach to the relevant policymakers and regulators. So this is a very familiar approach, I think, but there are many issues in the practical application of this, and we see in many jurisdictions that there is a very narrow and sometimes misleading application of this concept of fiduciary duty, making it essentially a duty of only short-term profit maximization, which is really the opposite of what a modern interpretation of fiduciary duty is. So this is why we've published these roadmaps. And as I said, France is absolutely one of the leaders in sustainable finance globally. With this leadership, of course, comes responsibility. And I hope that it will be useful to have this roadmap for France as a guide to how the regulatory landscape could be further enhanced. So there are a few recommendations that I'd like to highlight. One is that regulators should clarify that all investors should integrate and disclose ESG issues across all asset classes. That investors should consider the sustainability impact or outcomes of their investment activity, so not just disclose the processes they have, but also outcomes. That includes developing methodologies to measure social and environmental outcomes. Thirdly, investors, regulators, and industry groups should develop tools to enable and support responsible investment. And we set out some recommendations to improve the dialogue between investors and companies on ESG issues. And finally, collaboration between investors, regulators, and industry groups on the TCFD, as the Minister mentioned, climate scenario analysis and Article 173 implementation. So I think there is a very broad agenda here for further work in France. And I'm excited to discuss this with our two eminent panelists. If I could invite you to join me on stage. I'm a bit envious because you got the nice music and I didn't. So next to me, Brune Poirson, Secretary of State to the Minister of Ecological and Inclusive Transition. Well, that's very impressive. So Brune worked at the French Development Agency in India, has been Director of Sustainable Development and Social Responsibility for Veolia Water in India, and a researcher on social innovation and corporate social responsibility, and was elected as MP last year. And next to her, Philippe Zaouati is the CEO of Mirova, an asset management company subsidiary of Natixis dedicated to responsible investment. And Mirova currently manages over 10 billion euros in equities, fixed income, infrastructure, and impact investing. And Philippe is also chair of Finance for Tomorrow, which is our partner for this roadmap. And Finance for Tomorrow is an initiative led by the Paris Europlus and the actors of the Paris Financial Center to promote sustainable finance in France and internationally. So, having heard the Minister talk about this broader sustainability agenda and the energy transition, and then thinking about the France roadmap for sustainable finance, in terms of your priorities and your perspective on this, what are your main priorities now for taking this roadmap and pushing the sustainability agenda in the French financial sector?
Well, because we're amongst friends, and hello everybody, I was just, perhaps I would have started by saying that one of the key priorities would have been to convince the finance minister that it was actually critical to focus on sustainable finance. But that job is done, apparently. I was very happy about, all the things that, and all the concrete commitments that Bruno Le Maire made. And I think it really shows and highlights that really focusing on sustainable finance in France, it's not a marketing issue. We're not doing greenwashing here. Because we're facing very hard issues when it comes to social justice, and you all hear about the heated debate that we have in France on taxes. I think clearly we have identified sustainable finance as a key tool. Now the question is, how do we go about implementing it? So there are several ways. One of the ways is really focusing on the fiduciary duty. We want to ensure that green products performance is industrialized. So basically, as you know, fiduciary duty is, and I'm quoting, the legal obligation of one party to act in the best interests of the interested party. But on green finance, we believe it should also be a commitment duty to take into account ESG criteria, and also, but throughout the whole investment process and even in business management chains. So this is really one of our key priorities. I don't know how much time I have, so I'm not going to go on for too long, but I think this is the number one priority. Another priority, obviously, is taking the Article 173, which, as you know, we came up with it in France, and we want to take it to the European level. We want also, in a way, to industrialize it. We want it to become the basis and to be used in other financial centers and to be used as a criteria as well in terms of methodology to harmonize the different methodologies, but also in terms of reporting frameworks. We also want to accelerate mobilization of private capital and flows towards low carbon projects. So that's one of the things that we do very concretely with the One Planet Summit.
Perfect. We can come back to some of these aspects.
I can go on for ages.
I want to drill deeper into a couple of these issues, but maybe, Philippe, first for you. So we have this roadmap that we talked about, and you have a very central, of course, position with the Finance for Tomorrow. So how will you take this forward in your work in the Finance for Tomorrow?
Thank you very much, first, for your kind words on, about the French leadership on sustainable finance. And thank you, dear Minister, dear Brune, for all your action and your continued support to sustainable finance in France and all over the world.
Without inspiring people like you, it wouldn't be possible.
Thank you very much. And I mean, I would like to congratulate first the PRI and the team for the roadmap. It's very interesting, very impressive. It's very important for us to have this feedback from international and recognized observers and advisors, and we take it as a recognition, but also as a way to move forward and to take step forward and improve what we do on green finance. Maybe to start, may I say one word about Finance for Tomorrow? Finance for Tomorrow is the initiative that was taken 2 years ago now by Paris Europlace, by the Paris Financial Place. Now we gather about more than 60 members, all the what we call the ecosystem, the French green and sustainable finance ecosystem, with banks, insurance companies, investors, asset management companies, but also, I mean, a lot of consultants, a lot of players. All this ecosystem is very rich, and we have, I mean, set our goal to first, I mean, increase increase the greening of the Paris financial marketplace on one hand, and also to promote the Paris financial place outside of the country. And these two objectives are very important because we are in a world where there is competition and cooperation at the same side. And we think that the most will cooperate, the more will be the winner of the game. And this is the reason why we have set up these actions. So maybe I can come back later on a couple of topics, but in the roadmaps, there are a lot of actions that are proposed by the PRI, and where we think that Finance for Tomorrow could play an important role to carry on and coordinate all the market players. This is specifically about improving and clarifying the ESG methodologies. This is about also reporting more precisely and focusing on impact measurement methodologies, carbon footprint, but not only carbon footprint. This is also about improving the dialogue between investors and issuers, and we think that we can also play a very important role on these. And the fourth point, which I think is probably the most important, is the question of the offer of responsible saving products for the retail market, where I think also there are a lot to do.
Thank you, and I should say that we've had very good cooperation, not just with Finance for Tomorrow, but also recognize our good colleagues at the UNFFI and the Generation Foundation in the work on this roadmap. I wanted to come back to a couple of these broader issues that were raised in the introduction, because I think that they are really critical, and this concept of a just transition to a low-carbon economy that the minister also raised, and thinking about the role specifically of the financial sector. And from your perspective, from the, let's say, the ministry point of view and the regulatory point of view, what is the link between this agenda of a just transition and sort of financial market regulation, and how you think about the role of the financial sector?
I don't think we can talk about social justice without talking about the role of the financial sector, for many reasons. Just one of them, you know, when I go back to my constituency and then I hear people who have a difficult life and they've just had to face an increase in carbon price, they just want coherence. They want justice. And what does it mean? It means that every single actor, player of society has to do more for the environment. And thus, it's pretty obvious, the financial sector is a key sector, also because we know that taxpayers' money won't be enough to finance the ecological transition. So this is why we want to increase this is why we want the financial sector to play a key role, and we want to do that through several ways, by encouraging it at the European level as well with the uptake of the Article 173. What we want to do also is to provide more transparency when it comes to the investment products that French people could put their saving on. We want also to streamline all these different financial products that we have in France so that they become clearer, but also more impactful. And we want to be able also to make banks accountable to people. Because at the end of the day, they have, people's savings. So people vote for us, but they also give their savings to banks. And so accountability has to be, it belongs to politicians towards their citizens, but it's the same for banks, I think. So that's the type of framework we want to put in place. I could go down and just provide further information when it comes to the specific measures, but...
No, but I think this is really useful and a useful framework, we think. And it takes me back to something you said, Philippe, about, and this is explicit in the roadmap as well. One of the points in the roadmap that I mentioned was that investors should consider sustainability impacts or outcomes, and that includes develop methodologies to measure social and environmental investment outcomes. Yeah. So in this context of a just transition, does that mean that you will be actively looking at ways of measuring the social impacts of energy transition and the role of the financial sector, for instance?
The responsible investment started maybe 25, 30 years ago in France, and it started by the social aspects, mainly. It was mainly about, congregations, also the unions, and all this ecosystem creating some products to help people to get a job, or to help also north-south development flows. These last few years, we have been focused a lot on the E of ESG, because climate is probably the most important battle that we have to make. But when we speak about ESG, this is something that means something. It means that all the environmental and social impact are really together, and that we need to look at this together. And so, in terms of methodologies, clearly we need to make more about this. And it's not because something is not easy to measure with a quantitative tool that it's not useful to measure it. And so I think we can do a lot on this. We have started to work and to create some working groups at Finance for Tomorrow level to work on the carbon measurement, but of course on the way to be compliant with a 2-degree scenario. But being compliant with a 2-degree scenario means, as the minister said before, clearly that we integrate also the social aspects. Maybe just a word also to come back to the retail investors and savers, because if we want to, money is also the way we save money to do some projects in the future and so on. And this is something which is a part of our life. And if we really manage to convince the people that the way they use and they save the money will have an important impact in the economy, it will be something also very important. So we have the chance to have 2 labels in France for sustainable investment product. One which is about ESG integration, and the other one which is really focused on impact-friendly investments. But these labels are for the time being, not well known. We need to improve a lot and to improve the awareness of these kind of labels. We know that we are pushing this at the European level, and probably maybe in a couple of years we will have an eco label at the European level as well. But for the time being, we have these two labels in France, so let's do it at the national level and improve the awareness and improve also and accelerate the flows into this investment because it will be also one way, there are a lot of other ways, but one way to make this energy transition more something concrete at the citizen level.
I think there are some red lights flashing, and usually that indicates that we should be thinking about wrapping up. But I wanted to end maybe by drawing in a little bit more of this international perspective, and both of you have discussed that in various aspects of it. So obviously these policies and these initiatives do not exist in a vacuum, in the sense that capital markets are globalized, and many of the challenges that we're trying to address are global in their nature. So again, maybe starting with the political perspective and thinking about how you see this agenda, not just in France, but maybe at the European level, at the global level. What are your priorities? I mean, the minister mentioned the high-level expert group and all the taxonomy issues and things that come out of that. But in a broader sense, you know, how high is this really on the agenda, and what will the French government be doing?
It's clearly very high on the agenda, more than ever, I would say. We're lucky enough to have a president who's deeply, intimately convinced about the fact that sustainable finance is absolutely critical. Critical to achieving the ecological transition, and the ecological transition is critical to our survival. So it's clearly a priority. So how are we going to make it concrete? Through several initiatives. One of them is the G7. You know, France is going to be hosting the G7 next year. And so in the run-up to the G7, we'll have several meetings where we'll be working on the framework and on how to move the agenda. We're working on it right now. And for example, I'm not going to detail everything now, but one of the things that we are going to be doing is bringing finance ministers and environment ministers together to rethink the mandate that they give to these large international public development banks, such as the World Bank or and a host of international banks. They have to focus more of their money towards green projects, but also they need to use their money differently so that they can attract more private money and de-risk some of the investments. So that's one of the priorities clearly, and we want something concrete to come out of this meeting. Another thing also is that through the One Planet Summit, which is an initiative that we set up in France when President Trump decided to leave the Paris Agreement, it's basically the way we see it. It's an event, but more than an event that happens every year, it's a platform of projects that are really disruptive, that are very large scale, and that aim to attract and be a repository of projects where we test out new instruments and solutions, or sustainable finance new solutions. We believe, for example, that biodiversity is the new frontier of sustainable finance. And we want to make it concrete. And how do we do that? By bringing together the best minds and the best CEOs of the planet in a lab called the One Planet Summit Lab, and we brought them all together, and Philippe is part of it, actually. And we want this lab to provide not only recommendations, but also actionable and action, and they will, and I'm not going to detail here everything, but we want to set up coalitions on a broad range of topics such as biodiversity, energy, the ocean, and find and identify new sustainable finance solutions to actually fund these projects. So that's one of the issues, one of the ways. The other way is also to push the agenda at the European level very strongly. And we also want to include as part of the discussion countries such as China and India, and not only the G7.
Great. So this is
so it's a major priority.
A global priority.
Yes.
That's very good. Finally, just a couple of quick words maybe on how you see the finance for tomorrow beyond France.
Yes, of course. I mean, similar things on our side. I mean, you know, this kind of initiative, Finance for Tomorrow, there is one in France, but there is also a lot of similar initiatives all over the world. I mean, in London, in all the European countries, Frankfurt, Milan, Stockholm, and there are also some initiatives in New York now, and in China, in Shenzhen, Shanghai, and so on. We have decided to gather all these initiatives into a network under the roof of the UNEP, which is the Financial Centers for Sustainability. And we had a first meeting of 20 of these green finance initiative in Shanghai a couple of weeks ago. And actually, France and China are co-chairing this network. So I think this collaboration between Europe and China will be absolutely key. And the way we would like this financial centers network to work is also to improve standards and to work on taxonomies, on having the same view and same same grammar about this.
And that I think is very good to. We started with France, but we moved up to look at the global issues, and I think this is how we need to think about this. I should mention maybe also that the PRI has now over 2,000 signatories in over 50 countries, and we just also opened our first office in Beijing. So I think this is moved from being more local initiatives to being a truly global movement, and hopefully that global movement can help solve some global problems. So with that, thank you so much to my two panelists, and thank you to the audience.